Helicopters are now hitting targets in Libya. Russia, as we've heard, has denounced this as a precursor to ground operations. Do you agree with that?
I think some people are saying there are already ground forces there acting. Obviously, that would be in violation of UN resolutions. I think Sergei Lavrov is echoing what lots of people are saying all around the world now. I think it'll be interesting to see the Sino-Russian summit on June the 15th when Chinese and Russian leaders get together and see whether they can do anything. Because at the moment, what we have is $750 million spent by US taxpayers, 1.7 billion of British taxpayers' money voted for by the people behind me there. And what have we got? A refugee crisis, 100,000 estimated to be made refugees. Britain and France saying they're not going to give them any help on resettlement, and 10,000 people dead. To put that into perspective, in a country of 6 million, that is like killing 500,000 people in the United States, based on the war so far.
Well, peaceful initiatives have been expressed, of course, by both Russia and the African Union. Why doesn't, therefore, NATO listen to this and relax its military operation and allow some sort of mediation to take place, at least to create some ceasefire?
It's been a deliberate, it seems so deliberate, the attempts at stopping any type of peace process, whether it be from the Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez or indeed the African Union. We didn't really hear much about that trip. All we now know is that William Hague, the British Foreign Secretary, is seated there, and he's in with the rebels. The UN panel in the past few days has said that there are war crimes being committed by some of the rebels. So presumably that means the British Foreign Secretary is in touch with them.
Well, William Hague is actually saying he is supporting the Libyan people. He's supporting the National Transitional Council. The question is, who are they? Who makes up that council?
Well, whoever they are, the UN panel said that some of them are responsible for war crimes. Given that we have British politicians of that rank visiting the Transitional Council, shows that, well, if it ever came to an International Criminal Court decision, I'm sure he'll be being subpoenaed. It's looking more and more like a disaster, with only Russia and China holding any cards to play at the moment. And we also know that a lot of developing leaders will, at least, given your Goldman Sachs story, realize that a leader like Gaddafi, the corruption in the Gaddafi regime, usually spells disaster. Rapprochement with the West was a disastrous decision.
But who should Russia and China be talking to? If negotiations should take place, obviously Gaddafi hasn't shown much cooperation in the past, and indeed the rebels, they don't want a ceasefire, do they? They don't want any negotiation. They want to see this military campaign ending the way they want to see it, with Gaddafi dead.
I think lots of countries are looking at what's happening in Libya with alarm, because they don't want to be caught on the wrong side. There has been now Chinese talking to some of the rebels as well. So what would have to happen is an international peace process of a kind. Notice how the UN has shown itself to be utterly lacking. That resolution, should it have actually been voted for? I think China and Russia may be arguing about whether they should have allowed that resolution to go forward, because what we're now seeing is like a Yugoslavia rerun, and Gaddafi, the corrupt dictator himself, who used to be such a beacon, you know, Nelson Mandela's friend, in recent years he hasn't been, and he's still there. And I don't think US and European well, the Americans don't particularly like it, as we know from the vote in the House. Let's wait and hear what President Obama tells the House of Representatives in Washington as to the scope, the duration, and the costs of this war, because it's not going well, and what we need now is a comprehensive peace process. Apache helicopters, probably, you know, helped by Israel. The Arab world must be looking at these Apache helicopters and thinking more about Gaza, frankly, and how this looks like an attack by the developed world on the developing world, and everyone's eyeing up those oil resources.
Just briefly, you and I have talked a lot about the Libyan conflict and, of course, the Arab Spring throughout the Middle East. Why is it, though, from a journalist's point of view, do you think that Libya is getting more media attention than the likes of Yemen and Syria at the moment?
With regard to Yemen, it was quite amazing how international networks didn't focus on the fact that the president himself had been injured. I mean, that's a big story. And I think what's happening in Yemen will certainly figure much more greatly. People were saying, oh, al-Qaeda taking over a town wasn't really news. President Saleh was deliberately allowing that. Things are interesting there. As for Syria, there's no way Russia or China would sanction any attack on Syria, and it being such a beacon when it comes to the Middle East against the nuclear-armed power of Israel makes it a particularly difficult flashpoint for the West. So I don't think there'll be any attack on Syria anytime soon.
Live from London, journalist and author Afshin Rattansi, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on RT.